It was supposed to be a peaceful night. The kind of night when you feel safe, surrounded by love, believing nothing bad could ever touch your home. My daughter Emily, who had always been my light and strength, was sleeping soundly. But that night, everything shattered. A moment forever burned into my memory. Karen, a woman I once trusted, broke into our house with unthinkable intent. My heart still races when I remember her face, the cold determination in her eyes. She had always been unpredictable, but never, in my worst nightmares, did I imagine she would do something so monstrous. She shot my disabled daughter while she slept. My precious Emily, helpless, innocent, unaware of the horror creeping into her dreams. Why would Karen do this? What kind of darkness could twist a person's soul so completely? This wasn't just a break-in. This was personal, but that was only the beginning. What came after, the secrets, the revelations, the horrifying truths, would make me question everything I thought I knew about trust, loyalty, and the fragility of human nature. Emily was born with a disability that affected her mobility. Despite her challenges, she had the brightest spirit I'd ever known. Her laughter could fill a room with hope. Her determination inspired everyone who met her. From the moment she opened her eyes each morning, she brought energy and purpose into my life. She never let her condition define her. She was defined by her fierce heart. I remember one particular afternoon. Emily was curled up with her favorite book, her soft voice humming as she traced the words with her finger. She looked up and asked, "Mom, can I help you with your work?" That was Emily, always wanting to contribute, to be part of everything. Even when it was hard, our bond was unbreakable. A love so strong it made the darkest days brighter. And maybe that was why Karen's betrayal cut so deep. At first, she seemed like any other neighbor, friendly, helpful, always eager to lend a hand. She brought meals, offered to run errands, insisted on taking Emily out when I needed rest. Her kindness seemed genuine, but over time, something shifted. Karen began to show up uninvited at all hours. Sometimes she'd stand in our yard, staring at the house without knocking. Other times, she'd let herself in, making excuses about being worried. There was a darkness in her eyes, something possessive I didn't understand. It began subtly, strange comments, backhanded insults she tried to disguise as concern. "It must be exhausting, always dealing with her," she once whispered, her gaze fixed on Emily like she was a burden instead of a blessing. I told myself she meant no harm. But each visit left me feeling unsettled. Then came the jealousy. Karen started to fixate on our bond. "It must be nice to be so close to your daughter," she'd say, her voice lined with resentment. She began criticizing me, how I cared for Emily, how I arranged our routines. Her visits became more frequent, more intrusive. One evening, she walked in without knocking. Emily and I were laughing over a silly story when Karen appeared in the doorway. "She's doing well," she said, her tone flat. "But she can't do much, can she?" The way she said it chilled me. Like Emily was an object she had the right to judge. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. My instinct screamed at me, but I still tried to rationalize her behavior. After all, she'd been kind once, hadn't she? The night everything changed started like any other. Emily was in her bed, her breathing soft and even. The house was quiet, too quiet. Every creak in the floorboards sounded louder, every shadow deeper. I tried to ignore it. But around 2 a.m., a noise jolted me awake, a soft scrape, followed by a deliberate thud. I held my breath, straining to hear another sound, slow, heavy footsteps crossing the living room. Panic shot through me. I reached for my phone with trembling hands, but fear rooted me to the bed. My heart pounded as I thought of Emily, defenseless and unaware. Then, a voice cut through the darkness. "It's time." I recognized it instantly. Karen. My blood ran cold. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. She appeared in the hallway, her silhouette outlined in the glow of the porch light. She was holding something, a gun. Before I could move, she raised it. The gunshot shattered the night. Time stopped. I stumbled to Emily's side, my hands shaking as I checked for a pulse. My daughter, my heart was lying motionless. A scream tore itself from my throat. I called 911, sobbing, begging for help. But in my gut, I knew the truth. Emily was gone. Karen stood there, watching with chilling calm. "She never understand," she said, her voice flat. "But you'll remember." Then she turned and vanished into the night. The sirens arrived minutes later, but they came too late. My world had already ended. The investigation revealed what I hadn't dared to imagine. Karen's journals were filled with rants about how perfect our life seemed, about how she couldn't stand being on the outside. She wrote about feeling invisible, about needing to destroy what she couldn't have. "She never see how much I've done," she scribbled on one page. "If she won't let me in, I'll make her pay." It wasn't a random act of violence. It was the final act in a twisted obsession. The police found Karen hiding in her apartment, clutching Emily's drawing in her hands. She didn't resist arrest. She didn't show remorse. Sitting in that interrogation room, I was forced to face the truth. The woman I thought was my friend had been plotting to take everything from me. In the days after, I walked through our house like a ghost, replaying every sign I'd ignored. The late-night visits, the possessive glances, the cruel remarks disguised as concern. I kept asking myself the same question. Why didn't I see it? But no answer could change what had happened. The funeral was small, just family and the few friends who remained. I stood beside Emily's casket, my hand resting on the wood, wishing with everything in me that this was a nightmare. But the reality was colder than anything I'd ever known. The trial began weeks later. I sat in court as the prosecutor described Karen's obsession, how she had planned every detail, how she had convinced herself she was justified. Karen's defense tried to argue she was mentally ill, that she didn't understand the consequences of her actions. But the jury saw the truth. She was consumed by jealousy and rage. The verdict came swiftly: guilty. Life in prison without parole. It was supposed to be closure. But when the sentence was read, I felt nothing, because no punishment could bring Emily back. No justice could erase what Karen had stolen. In the months that followed, I began therapy, trying to process the guilt, the anger, the crushing sorrow. I kept replaying the night in my head, the sounds, the sights, the feeling that my world was ending. And through it all, one truth remained. Emily was gone because of a woman I'd let into our lives. But as impossible as it felt, I knew I had to keep going. I owed that to Emily, to honor her spirit, her courage, her joy. The journey was only beginning. The pain would never fully leave. But I made a vow to survive, to rebuild, to tell her story so no one else would ever underestimate the darkness hiding behind a friendly smile. After the trial ended and Karen was led away in handcuffs, a strange emptiness settled over my life. The verdict brought a measure of justice, but not peace. There was no relief. Only a quiet, aching space where my daughter's laughter used to live. I walked back into our home, the same place that had once felt safe, now transformed into a monument of everything we'd lost. Emily's room was exactly as she'd left it, her favorite book on the nightstand, her drawings pinned to the walls. Seeing those little details broke me all over again. For days, I sat in that room, clutching her pillow, breathing in the last traces of her scent. I replayed the memories like a movie on an endless loop, her smile, her determination, the way she'd say, "We can do anything, Mom." Even in the depths of my grief, part of me still believed I would hear her voice again. That somehow this was all a mistake. But reality never softened. It was the small hours of the night that were the hardest. When the world was quiet, and there was nothing left to distract me from the truth. I would hear echoes, footsteps that weren't there, the creak of a door that would never open again. But grief doesn't follow rules. It comes in waves, unpredictable and merciless. Some mornings I would wake up and almost forget what had happened, until the memory returned like a blade. Other days, it felt impossible to even get out of bed. People tried to comfort me with words that rang hollow. She's in a better place. Time will heal. But time wasn't healing anything. It only magnified the emptiness. In those moments, I clung to one truth. Emily wouldn't have wanted me to give up. She was a fighter, a survivor. And for her sake, I had to try to keep living. When I finally gathered the strength to leave the house, I realized how much the world had moved on without us. Neighbors avoided eye contact, unsure what to say. Friends I'd trusted disappeared into silence, uncomfortable with the gravity of what had happened. But there were others, people who showed up, who held my hand, who sat in the darkness with me and didn't demand I be okay. Their compassion was like a lifeline. The therapist said healing would be slow. That trauma this deep leaves scars you can't see. But every scar is a testament that you survived. Emily's story became more than my grief. It became my mission. I wanted people to understand that violence doesn't always look like a stranger in the dark. Sometimes it wears a familiar face. Sometimes it walks right through your front door with a smile. I started speaking to groups, parents, teachers, communities, sharing what had happened. At first, my voice trembled. My hands shook. But each time I told our story, it felt like I was taking a piece of the power back. People needed to hear this truth. You can never be too careful when it comes to the people you let into your life. And if something feels wrong, trust that instinct. But even as I tried to help others, the hardest part was returning to Emily's side as she recovered. Because yes, against all odds, she survived. The bullet that was meant to end her life had missed her heart by less than an inch. When she woke up in the hospital, her eyes were clouded with fear and confusion. She couldn't understand why someone she trusted had tried to hurt her. Neither could I. Those early days were a blur of doctors, beeping machines, and whispered prayers. Emily didn't speak much. She stared at the ceiling, her small hands clutching her blanket like it was the only thing anchoring her to this world. I stayed by her side, refusing to leave even for a moment. I would stroke her hair, tell her stories, and remind her over and over, "You are safe now." But safety wasn't something Emily believed in anymore. The physical healing was grueling, multiple surgeries, endless pain. But the emotional wounds were worse. She couldn't sleep without nightmares. She flinched at sudden sounds. She no longer trusted anyone. One afternoon, as the sun poured through the hospital window, she finally looked at me and whispered, "Why did she hate me?" There was no answer that would make sense. So I told her the only thing I could. It wasn't your fault. You are loved. You are precious. And nothing she did will ever change that. In the weeks that followed, Emily began to reclaim little pieces of herself. She started to draw again. First, shaky lines and smudges on paper. Then, images full of color, her way of fighting back against the darkness. I watched her, awed by her resilience. Even at her lowest, she refused to let what happened define her. Slowly, we found a new routine. We filled our days with simple joys, reading together, planting flowers in the backyard, watching movies she loved. Every smile she managed was a victory. Every laugh a sign that the light inside her hadn't been extinguished. But healing isn't linear. There were days when she couldn't get out of bed. Days when she'd ask me, "Will she come back?" And my heart would break all over again. I'd hold her close and promise, "No one will ever hurt you again." And I meant it. As we rebuilt, I also faced my own guilt. I replayed every sign I'd ignored, every uneasy feeling, every moment. I convinced myself I was overreacting. I had trusted Karen. I had let her in. And that decision almost cost me everything. Therapy helped me understand that blaming myself wouldn't change the past. But it could destroy the future if I let it. So I chose to forgive myself. Not because I deserved it, but because Emily needed me whole. In time, I learned the power of vulnerability, of telling the truth, no matter how ugly it was. Because pretending we were okay wasn't helping us heal. The months turned into a year. Emily grew stronger. She started school again, timid at first but gradually finding her confidence. She began to smile without hesitation. She started to trust carefully chosen people again. Every milestone, her first day back in the classroom, her first sleepover with a friend, felt like a triumph over the darkness Karen had tried to force upon us. We also made the choice to move to a new home, one that didn't carry the memories of that night. It wasn't about running away, it was about giving ourselves a fresh start. I watched Emily stand in her new room, sunlight spilling across the floor, and for the first time in so long, she looked hopeful. That was when I knew we would be okay. Not because we would ever forget, but because we were choosing life, choosing joy, choosing each other. Looking back, there are still moments when grief ambushes me, a song on the radio, a forgotten toy, the way the light falls through a window. But I've learned that grief and love are intertwined. You can't have one without the other, and I would never trade the love I had for Emily, not even to avoid the pain. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that the human spirit is stronger than any darkness. My daughter taught me that. To anyone out there who has faced unspeakable loss, know this: you are not alone. You are not broken. You are surviving, one breath at a time. And you deserve to heal. If our story has reached you, if it has made you feel seen, less alone, I invite you to share your own. Tell your story. Let the world witness your resilience. Because together, we can create something stronger than fear. Together, we can rise. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing in hope, even when it feels impossible. And thank you for honoring Emily's spirit by being part of this journey. Please, if this touched your heart, share it with others. Subscribe to stay connected. And remember, no matter how dark it gets, you have the power to rebuild. One day, one moment, one act of love at a time.